the program. Oh, that's my cue. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome to each and every one of you watching here live in Zoom, or whether you're on Facebook watching us live. You have joined us today for our Cultivating Voices live poetry. It's Sunday, and it's the second, it's not the second Sunday of the month, but it's our second Sunday. And on the second Sunday of our month, we always have our new books showcase. Today, we have just four incredible poets. I love this constellation of poets, and they have so many interesting intersections with each other. And as usual, the alchemy that we never plan usually congeals into the most fabulous ways of conversing through poetry that one can imagine. And that's what I love about having these triolets and quartets of poets in our new books showcase. Well, I'm your host for today, Sandy Yannone. I'm joining you from Olympia, Washington today. I've still actually got my holiday display up, even though it's January. That's all right. Let's continue to kind of spread the cheer. January can be a very challenging month for people, and of course, there's always things going on in the world that are very heavy, and so I like to bring a little lightness to the program when I can. Well, for our poets today, we're going to be hearing from Suzanne, Edison, Adam Wyeth, Susan Rich, and Raul Sanchez. And again, as I mentioned, these poets are phenomenal. A number of them have read with us in the past, and we're looking forward. We always look forward to showcasing folks who haven't been with the program before. This is just a blockbuster of a reading today. I want to remind folks and thank those of you joining us here live in Zoom that the chats are live today. So please share the love with the poets. Of course, I always remind people that please leave respectful comments, but be as generous and exuberant as you care to be. It's always a really fun, active chat here at Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. And I'm always amazed when I look at other reading series where the chat is kind of very quiet and taciturn, and ours is always very lively. So please do participate and enjoy that interaction as the reading is going on. As well as I would love to remind each and every one of you that these poets have worked tirelessly at their craft and their work, and their presses work tirelessly at promoting the poets' work. We will be putting in the chat links to each one of the poets' current books, and hope that if you have the resources, that you will buy 1, 2, 3, or all of the books in our new book showcase today. And thanks to, of course, Don Krieger and Kim Ports Parsons for providing the opportunities for us to share all that information with you. Well, without further ado, let's move on to our folks reading for today. Our first poet, I'm so excited that when Suzanne contacted me and said, oh, my new book is coming out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. And that was months ago, and now it's here. So finally, We get to hear from the book. I'm so excited to have you here on the program. I have known Suzanne for a number of years, and I marvel at her steadfast and devoted work in so many things, but of course I mostly know through poetry. And I'm just thrilled to have Suzanne Edison with us. Let me share her more formal biography with all of you so that I just don't gush like gush about like her amazing work, because I've known her as we first met in Poets on the Coast. That's a whole nother story that I'll be talking about in a little later. But Suzanne E. Edison writes often about the intersection of illness, healing, the natural world, and art. Her book, Since the House is Burning, from MoonPath Press, was published in 2022. Her chapbook, The Body Lives Its Undoing, was published in 2018 by Benaroya Research Institute, and her work can be found in the Michigan Quarterly Review. JAMA, Heal, Swim Every Day, and numerous other publications. Her poetry has been included in several anthologies, such as The Healing Art of Writing. Suzanne is a Hedgebrook 2019 alumna. For those of you not knowing, Hedgebrook is an incredible retreat center here in the Pacific Northwest. And Suzanne teaches writing workshops locally and through the University of California, San Francisco. Would you please join me with a rousing welcome for Suzanne Edison?
Thank you, Sandy. You are always so enthusiastic. I so appreciate that. And I think actually we met at AWP many years ago in Portland too. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Kim and Sandy and Don. I don't actually know you, and I'm so grateful to everyone for coming. Susan, Rich, and I are in writing groups together. I've been in workshops with her. I see one of my former mentors, Lori Droscher, is here, and many other friends. I'm so grateful to be here. And also Risa Denenberg did an amazing reading yesterday. So if anybody wants to go look for her recording through MoonPath Press, they did an amazing job. Since the House is Burning, I don't know if you can see, it's hard to see it because of the way the camera is, but the house, Since the House is Burning is actually part of a adage, an Italian adage that my father-in-law used to tell my husband. Since the house is burning, let us warm ourselves. And that is kind of the theme of this whole book. Since every house that I know is on fire, personal illnesses and our planet and our democracies, how do we warm ourselves? How do we find creativity, aliveness, and keep going? So the first, I'm not going to read the poem that is actually in, but I'm going to read the first poem in the book. And Sandy, if I've timed myself, but if I go over 15, please don't, just give me the hook, okay? We should not wait for fruit. Once I lived with my lover in the hyperbole of petals and penumbra, ravenous as termites and the flickers who mined them. We bent to each other as if to salt licks and lived in gauzy oblivion to nightly siren sweeps and the morning cavalcade of crows. We erupted like avalanche lilies through snow, profuse, skimping at nothing. Decades now past the verge of vernal, a cane by the bed, you press your cottony head towards mine, and like a salve, pour out an unearthed story about a wounded dog found in weeds you carried home. It's then I melt towards you, believing I taste grass on your lips, sip of bitter and bright, as we roll over, find our sway, and let gravity take us deeper, drunk as bees in fuchsia. Many of you know that I have a daughter who's now a young adult, but when she was quite little, she was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease and was in and out of treatment and lots of medications for many, many years. This poem was written when she was younger. I also love still lifes. So this is called Still Life Without Skull. The infusions were pulsed too fast, and the doctor admitted her mistake. But the jackhammering in my child's head went on for days, not to be medicated away. I watched my girl writhe on the floor like a worm cut in half, and felt I was a captive in a new infernal circle. And though I can't see or hold death in my arms, it ticks in us. I think of old Dutch paintings thick with vermilion, pomegranates, overripe grapes blooming from true black. Half-eaten meats house a congregation of flies. Tenacious strings of gristle and lemon peels dangle over the table's edge. Here, there is no skull, but the sparrow's eye flickers, a watch chain in its mouth. Seaside vacation with the dead. Maybe it is the shriveled spiders on the rug at the Cliff House, long dead and trapped inside, looking like tiny hot air balloons, that tell me these beasts were fornicating and feasting more than I. Maybe it is the scraping sound of sowbug shells sucked up and spinning in the vacuum I employ that reminds me of the Asian lady beetle carapaces, dozens scattered on my dining table that greeted me years ago. Then my mother had been dead less than a day, and I was not there to feed her ice chips, soothe, rattle, and wheeze, or shroud with my body the carcass of her last breath. My memory opens like a slash of flesh. I watch evening hug the swelling redbud limbs as bats drain the air of insects. But I am not here to grieve. I want to know about the living to come, how to navigate by scent, how the tree grows around a nail into which its point has bitten. This poem is coming out hopefully this month from Lily Poetry Review. It's called That Time the Woman Known as Mother Disappeared. In the pine tree of my youth, suckered in sap, I sequestered myself, straddling branches whose scales needled my skin. Alone with chickadees, finches, the berating squirrels, I sat above the forgotten hammock, weathering its knotted ends like my insides, while my mother, draped in white, lay cloistered in a hospital bed, room I was not allowed to visit. Hunkered on a limb, the air wreathed me, pungent with dandelions, a glister I used to crush in sweaty palms, hurrying home to make her a crown. I stayed in that tree, imagining her emptied, a devoured pine cone, and wondered what could remove the pitch the tarry resin of her siphoning depression, the one I had to avoid. Well, on a little bit lighter note, I hope, this is another still life poem. It's called The Complaining Still Life. Well, I never, the pomegranate huffs. Here I am, splayed, flayed, my fleshy seeds asunder next to the sweating persimmon. How am I common cause with gnawed bones? Someone swat that fly. Serrated slices of cow snort. Whose rich relation rigged this setup? My pinkness cozied up to ruby port, licking its glassy throat, a decanted sip left in a snifter nearby. Has Jesus departed yet? Dearly beloved, the napkin notices. We are gathered, we are so placed, displaced to enhance. No, reap remembrance. After the pocket watch and the hourglass kvetch, who's cleaning up after us? They concur. We are fact and fictions of once upon and times unyielding, often forgotten now. How am I doing on time? Doing okay? Okay. Two more. Another new one. It's called Self-Portrait in the Anthropocene. I think most of us know the Anthropocene is the time period we are currently living in. So here we go. I might be another casualty in these misaligned seasons. It's not just the darkness early that stalks my hard-won reason. Storm-blown trees and surf-eroding seas trouble my weather. On the couch, I'm curled as brown maple leaves after their faded veins turn ochre, last flush hushed, crisped by a too dry November. Once I relished a pile of leaves, setting a spark, watching smoke columns rise, stick in hand a flaming tip, I'd skywrite my name, cast spells over the land, hold the wand with a surety of heart, like a god bequeathing birthrights to planets and people. Ah, blessed smoke, the new gods of fire are like the old ones, untamable. Fracked and siphoned, we're blazing. Melting ice caps, channel ribbons of blue, a tapestry of silk and silt, canting Earth's axial spine. We're tilt-a-whirling in typhoons, while tycoons hope to colonize Mars. Who isn't listing into this millennium? Soon, the too much rain will cast doubt on my parched soil of mind. If only someone would catch and release me, like the newly hatched fly, drowsy and circling the window for escape. Leave me impressed in a deer's split heart hoofs, split heart prints, fallow and open to sky. Just so you know, actually our planet really is tilting off its axis by the amount of melted ice that is now turned to water in the oceans. Okay, last poem in the book, last poem for me today. Thank you all again so much. After my last breath, set my body afloat. Let tide beach my remains, eagle sweets, dinner for sand fleas. Let me be driftwood, pocked with insect hieroglyphs, a scroll translated, touch is the kingdom, open to all, as when we lay corkscrewed. Let gulls marrow my skeleton, screech their dissonant chords like a score for the years the child was ill. Let crabs hermit my skull, scrabble the vault that once stored mood indigo lyrics next to my lover's joke that happiness was a trend. When my heart, spiny urchin, finally unchambers, crusting this string of winged vertebrae, I'll be swept, scaly and shimmering as a lure. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, wow. I got a new heart for the new year. And I'm sharing my heart with
Beautiful.
you. It has a little chime in it also. I don't know if you can hear the chime. But that was an illustrious reading. And it's our first in our new book showcase for the year. Suzanne Edison, Since the House is Burning. And from MoonPath Press. I love MoonPath Press so much. And I was just actually having a little dialogue with the editor, Lana, earlier today. And MoonPath Press, we have a number of poets in our group that publish with MoonPath Press. They put out year after year, book after book that are phenomenal. And we just got to hear one today. Is Burning from 2022. I marveled at the signature way that you craft those images in your poems and kind of punctuate those words. But when I was thinking about your self-portrait to the Anthropocene, who isn't listing into the millennium? It also, what I was feeling throughout your work and your reading is who isn't listening to the millennium? And your combination of how we navigate grief and joys and consider how we can move through and listen to our own healing and make our own healings possible made me think about that. Who isn't listening into the millennium and listening to your poems, that we must listen to the millennium. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for that incredibly
Sandy.
provocative reading. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely
Thank you.
stunning.
Grateful to be here. Appreciate all the comments and looking forward to listening to everybody else.
Well, let's list into listening to our next poet. As you all know, I have, of course, the warmest place in my heart for salmon poetry because I happen to be a salmon poet. And for me, it's like a birthday. I feel like it's my birthday when I get to introduce one of my salmon siblings to the program. And I have enjoyed, appreciated Adam Wyeth's books since I was able and so grateful to find them on the shelves of the Salmon bookshop in Ennistimon, in Ireland, which is where I picked up my first collection of Adam Wyeth's. And I'm a huge, huge fan of Adam's work. So to be able to hear from its newest collection here live on the program is truly, truly a joy for me. And if this first reading of 2022, our first new book showcase, doesn't go down as one of my favorites, I will be shocked because of who we have here assembled today. So a little more formally about this amazing voice that you are about to hear if you haven't heard Adam's poetry previously. Adam Wyeth is a poet, playwright, and essayist with not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 books of poetry published with Salmon Poetry. His debut collection, Silent Music, from 2011, was highly commended by the Forward Poetry Prize. And if you are not familiar, that is one of the most prestigious first new book prizes in Europe. In 2013, Salmon published his essays, The Hidden World of Poetry, Unraveling Celtic Mythology in Contemporary Irish Poetry. Again, a book I highly, highly recommend if you are interested in learning more about the connections of poetry and where the imagery from the Celtic traditions emerge from. His second collection of poetry, The Art of Dying, from 2016, was an Irish Times Book of the Year. Again, folks, these are no small accolades. Wyeth's plays have been performed across Ireland, New York, and Berlin. And in 2019, he received the Kavanaugh Fellowship Award. In 2020, Adam received the Arts Council Ireland Literature Project Award and was selected for an Abbey Theatre Development Program to work on a theatrical production of About Blank, which is his latest book, and the theatrical production premiered at the Dublin Theatre Festival in 2021. Would you please join me in welcoming a very productive, prodigious, and progressive poet, Adam Wyeth.
Thanks so much, Sandy. That really, I'm not sure I can live up to any of that, but it's a very generous introduction. Thanks so much. And yeah, it's wonderful to be a Salmon poet, I must say. So well, this is the latest book. It's called About Blank, and that's a panther's eye there. It is a panther. It's all set in Dublin, and it's that this panther, one of the characters in this book. It's really hard to even go. I mean, there's not 5 poetry collections. There's 3 poetry collections, but this I'm not even sure what this is. I suppose Sandy mentioned, my love of Irish myth, and also that I've been writing plays as well for the last few years. And I think with this latest book, and I suppose there's something as well to the Difficult Third, like the Difficult Third album, that I wanted to do something different. So this new book is like a mixture of narrative poetry. It's got a monologue in it. It's got a play in it. It's all set in Dublin, and it's my most experimental kind of work to date. So a lot of things I've been, the way of writing, the way I've been working the last few years have kind of gone into this, which is predominantly that I have this on my Word document I have called Speed Writing Write Rubbish. And it's really a document where I started where I would limber up before the proper writing, but it's now really where most of my work comes from. So this book was written in that very instinctive way, and it's kind of like, I'm really interested in a way I kind of work backwards, as I suppose a lot of us do, particularly with poetry, in that I write very instinctively and then try and work out what I'm writing. And this led to this book, which was really a real voyage of discovery and self-discovery, in that I think when you're writing out of the unconscious in that way, there's a lot of things from your psyche coming through. And so that was a really interesting thing for me. And I'm really interested in, I've been interested in, I say, Irish myth and Carl Jung, particularly depth psychology. So there's a lot of those elements kind of fed into this as I was writing it. It's a really hard book to read from because there aren't really any, it's bookended by two poems, like normal looking poems, and the rest, as I say, is this sort of fragmented long poem at the start and then a play and different things like that. And it's all set in Dublin, and it is all shaped in that way. But so yeah, like I say, it's this 4-part poetic sequence. So I'll begin with the first bookended poem in it and then end on the last poem in it as well. And I suppose within it, there is this emergence of a voice, and there's an emergence of a kind of writer's voice coming through. There's also aspects of the Jungian elements of the anima, which is the sort of the other self, if you like, within. So these are the things it kind of explores. And the first poem then is called Untitled. The woman in charge of the charity shop says she's given birth to me. All those years in my country, I was a gestating egg. Now, here I am, limbs and crown, a recent emigre. I lock up and watch the shop grow small and dark. I feel like a drone circling above as someone thumbs the controls. My whole life could fall through their fingers in a matter of minutes. I sink towards the city lights. Tall buildings stick out like teeth. An unbroken stream of people rush past. I can't tell where we start or end. Does the stone fork the river, or the river fork the stone? There is a book in the shop. It stands on the shelf, waiting for eyes to give it sight and voice to give it breath. And then it goes into this prologue of about blank. So I'll read the prologue and then I'll go into part 1. Prologue. It's late. I look out of the window onto Grosvenor Square and catch the moon behind the tree. A black cat watches across the street. I look out of the window and see a man get into a car. No, he's stepping out. I look out of the man stepping out of a car, shutting the door, a comforting clunk. The whole car sleeps. The moon is scaling the tree. I pick up a pace, patting my pockets, then stop under the tree. I return to the car, bleep it awake, open the door. I search for something that stirs and rocks with my weight as I root through the glove compartment. There are no gloves in the glove compartment anymore. All that's over. I rummage down the side of the doors, sliding my arms down the back pocket sleeves of the front seats. What is it he's searching for? He's coming out. He closes the door. An equivocal clunk. Did he find what he was looking for? I don't see anything on his person, in his hand. The black cat slinks across the street. The whole episode has become a mystery, and he doesn't know I know it exists. But who else looks? Who sees me looking now? A stranger looking over? No, looking down. A man about town, a town about a woman who sees not what I see, but what I don't. The moon is free of the tree at last and catches the cat's eye holding its tongue who looks out of the man onto Grosvenor Square. The slate rooftops are moon-washed. The gardens sleep in their lost colours. A woman is coming for me, as large as the city. This is what happens when we look out of the window all of the time, everywhere, now in Dublin. So a lot of the images which appear here, they recur throughout the text. So there's like the man, in the woman, the car, the cat, the moon. And so these kind of, they recur throughout the text and they kind of take on this kind of greater presence, symbolic presence, I suppose. So I'll just kind of skip through for the rest of the reading. I think just part one, which is called Summer's Death, Seedfall, and they all refer as well. There is a Celtic myth link, and there's also a link to Percival from Arthurian legend. Summer's Death, Seedfall alludes to the period of Samhain, Halloween, which is the Celtic New Year. So it starts at the end of October, and the speaker has lost their cat and comes across a woman who's lost her dog, and they get talking about that. But I'll just jump into this bit here. It begins with a memory. It begins with a seed. It does not begin as it means to go on. It grows up, stretches in the sun. It recoils from shadows. It sways in the wind. It greets the moon with a face like a coin. It has seen it all before. It has never seen anything before. Everything is first time, a blank mind, unwashed purity. No smell, new sheets, spring, lambing. No blood, a vitreous eyeball. It cracks out of the carapace. It cuts through. This is the violence. It opens its head. Branches appear. I've been dithering in the dark all my life, cooped up in a womb. I used to read, and these words meant something to me. Now the words shudder in a frozen monitor, stuck in the between time of a loading web page. The about blank in the chest, its cut in the throat, a stick between stones, holding up the dearly beloved. She closes her eyes. We are all in the dark. Rivers, canals, coastlines, the whole city looking the other way. She sleeps in me as I sleep in her. I will be this city one day, and then I'll be let back into the black of her. Each life hides another life inside. Another voice, never heard out loud, speaks in its own way. A silent film, unfolding an unbroken story of loss. This voice ripples in each of us. Call it the internal feminine. She lies curled like a question mark in bed, or dare I say, snake. A woman in fetal position, coiled like a brand new fern about to open. She is bereft, smelling the shirts of someone who left. Is it her father, her brother, her lover? Let's call it the forsaken masculine. The disappearance of one whose voice is heard in a dog's bark, or at least felt in the harsh October bite. The dank nights that grow longer each passing year. He walks with a secret voice in his back pocket. It moves through him. He locks the car door and gets closer with every step, and every moment is a step inside him that makes it move further away. He keeps walking until one day he falls into his own shadow, and no one can see it, and no one can hear it, and no one can touch it, and no one can smell it, and no one can taste it. The secret walks on, never giving itself away. Where did it go? Split asunder by the shadow that grows like a gulf, an oil spill, mushrooming, seeping into everything. Let's not make light of what can't be seen precisely. Let's not lose pursuit of specifics on the grounds of reality. Destroyed after last year's storm, they are waiting to be born. New ferns unfurl, fanning the earth. Each word creates another universe out of the one before, which in turn creates other words that are not words, and they occur, as it were, in their own worlds, independent of thought, insouciant to the backroom chatter, where insolvent smiles while away the small hours. Words must be some kind of cybernetic hoax to try and coax a confession out of, dipping in and out of the mind, a black box switch in which we are duped by their respected sounding, a circular relationship that engenders change in the environment. And that alteration is reflected in the system in some manner, triggering a structural transformation. Landing upon a word is a love transferred. Alighting from a word sparks pairs of opposites. Think of two people talking politics, poles apart in their views. Take that word, pole. They are both either end of this pole. They are both grasping at the same pole. In the end, there's no difference because they're talking about the same pole in different ways, but neither one of them can hear the other because the pole is so long that you have to shout to be heard. And when you have to shout to be heard, you can only hear your own voice. What you have are two transmitters and no receiver. To receive, you have to empty yourself. But you can't be empty if you're full of static fury. What I'm getting at or attempting to suggest is that I'm aware, as I propose this particular episode of this particular life on this particular day, there is no way you're going to grasp what I first imagined and second set out to express. Yet in this flight of fancy, what you suppose will be what happens. And as I give voice to this particular life, another life grows inside. Not that anything is supposed to happen, not that anything can happen. What is forming has already been formed. What is happening is as stillborn and as stock still as the gaps between these words. A white field of blank. There is nothing more to see and nothing more to say. Nothing more say than seeing a woman through a window on a bus. You attach to that glimpse whatever it is you are open to now. Most people don't see this particular person on this particular bus, but this one person does. And that is what this story, if I can call it a story, which I won't, is about. What does this glimpse tell us about ourselves? It tells us what we want to hear. It tells us we are on the bus having been glimpsed by someone on the street. There may be a faint picture within you now, and yet I have not mentioned any distinctive details. They don't even exist, which is a crazy proposition because we know very well, or did, that two strangers, a passerby and a passenger, are always with us. The glimpse passes in a second, but the thought attached to that glimpse lingers and leads to something else, something hidden that must come out, an essence. This is what the momentary chimera is about. It is for you to seek out the truth of the passerby and the passenger and to decide whether any part of them is worth detaining. If we call the passenger Claire, the passerby Stephen, we add fuel to the fire of hallucination. These schoolbook names that stretch throughout the English-speaking world and beyond resonate with certain reflexes. We know damn well what is happening here. Well, we have no idea actually, but it's all about that slippery pole again. Everything before and after sex is exactly what it suggests. Everything between is where and what literature takes off. I do hope you don't think I'm fiddling you. What I have to say is wholly serious. In the words of a great sage, you have to split the stick to find the light. How am I for time? Is it? Sorry, I didn't check the watch.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you're good.
How long? How many minutes have I got
Well,
left?
like about 3 minutes.
Okay, great. So I'll just read this bit. Where is I'm skipping on a bit now because it's, where is Claire now? Is she at any level aware her image has been played over and again in Stephen's head? She might sense something. She is known to daydream, especially on the ride home under the plane trees that flank the South Circular. For all we know, Claire caught sight of Stephen, her eyes meeting his behind the glassy sheen for a second, between wondering what to have for tea and who was around for the weekend. Perhaps the glimpse was just enough for her to think about a boy she knew from home. Whatever happened to him, she wonders, as she passes Dolphin's Barn and moves on to Rialto. An older voice behind her says, "They are taking over." Claire is aware that naming is caging. Something seen is something taken. The living sacrificed in dead words, trapping a cosmos into an hourglass. The more that we write, the more we forget. What remains of the living breathes in the dead. Would the English, for example, have taken any other native tree as a national symbol if its name were not linked to Druid? What are feelings then before they're sounding? And what are feelings when they are unspoken? Has language altered our reality so much that we move in a hall of mirrors, projecting skewed images onto the world and only seeing what is thrown back at us? Claire's wary when it comes to the hallucination of conversation. She has a good inner ear for what's really being said behind the thread of words. While we have uncovered the slippery nature of language, that words don't always mean what they say, or put another way, the speaker invariably remains in the shadows of what they're saying, and it's more about the current and humming between. Claire's aware of the generative properties words embody, the esoteric incantations locked in a series of letters which in the right order can transform reality, unearthing a language within the language, a molecular pattern of circular causal wires springing from a level below meaning carried by the land. Some people have an innate ability to separate the dross from people's sounds. Others can't tell the mole from the mound. Claire discerns another language, a language of the earth. And I think I'll end there. I don't think there's time to finish on the Rumi poem, but just to say thanks so much, Sandy, Don, and Kim for having me. It's really lovely. Thank you. And sorry, I'm sorry, I may have to go as well because I got the time wrong. And but I will catch everything on playback as well.
Thank you so much. Adam Wyeth, the book is about blank. And I just want to say what I appreciate when we come together on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry is, I appreciate the diversity of experiences that we get when we listen to different ways that poets construct what it is they're seeking to understand and say. And in Adam's work today, that hybridity of form and the way that the syntax was always seeking to find, seeking to unlock. I think of that stick, the image of that stick, when the stick opens to bring out the light, because as the speaker says, we are all in the dark. But when we listen, I go back to what's with Suzanne, when we begin to listen to the unique syntaxes of each other, that's when we can truly begin to understand all of our humanity. I want to just really honor that it's amazing when we get to experience a book that is not a collection of poems, a string of poems, and because it's rare, and I love the hybridity that's going on in the storytelling. Thank you so much, Adam. I was mesmerized, and I could I wish I could hear you read the entire book to me.
Another time.
Another time.
I'd be happy
Next
to.
time, next time I'm in Ireland, I might call upon you for that. Over many cups of tea. And we'll look out that window in Dublin and see what we can see. Thank you again. Well, as I mentioned, everyone, it's one thing to experience a book that is a book that is not a collection of individual poems, and that creates its own narrative through its unique hybridity of storytelling. And it is no small feat to arrive at a place when one does have a body of work that is entirely a collection of the collected works of that poet. And I am equally in awe of folks who arrive at that moment in their career. And that, of course, is who we will be turning to next in the form of the amazing Susan Rich. We'll be hearing from her latest collection, which is a new and selected poems. And again, as I've said, I so respect when a poet has arrived at that place where we need to have all the work in conversation with itself. And this is what I truly appreciate about Gallery of Postcards and Maps, because we get to travel through the themes of Susan's body of work over her career. And of course, when you write each individual book, you don't necessarily, or when you're writing those earlier books, you don't necessarily know how the future will converse with the past. And to have this collection now is an amazing, amazing opportunity to see how Susan's work has emerged over time. I've known Susan for a number of years, and I can get very kind of weepy about how much I respect and love Susan. So I'm going to go to the formal biography. Otherwise, the entire time will be about how much I love Susan and appreciate Susan. Susan Rich is the author of 8 books, including the book we featured today, Gallery of Postcards and Maps, New and Selected Poems. Her other collections, which we'll hear smatterings of because of the new and selected poems, are Cloud Pharmacy, The Alchemist's Kitchen, Cures Include Travel, and The Cartographer's Tongue, Poems of the World. Her poetry has earned awards from the Fulbright Foundation, PEN USA, and the Times Literary Supplement. She has been published vastly in places like the Harvard Magazine, New England Review, O Magazine, and Poetry Ireland Review. She co-edited Demystifying the Manuscript, Creating a Book of Poems, which is forthcoming from Two Sylvia's Press. And I actually have been thinking about this collection this book quite a bit, and wondering if there's something we can do on the program with that book as well. So let's talk about that another time. Again, it would be a unique offering here for our membership. Susan teaches at Highline College and directs Poets on the Coast, a writing retreat for women, which has saved my life many, many times. I am grateful for her voice. I am grateful for her poetry. I am grateful for her humanity. I am simply grateful to have you, Susan Rich, here on the program with us today.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here. I can't say thank you to everyone who's here who I know, because that would be my time, but I'm really glad to see so many friends, so many poets on the coast, so many Irish friends, so many friends yet to have. So I appreciate you spending Sunday afternoon with us. And because it's my normal way to plan out a reading, and then before I even start to change the order, that's what I'm going to do. So we'll see how it goes. I somehow believe that being a little bit dynamic or a little bit improvisational is perhaps keeping me on my toes and hopefully keeping you more interested. So I'm going to start with a poem that might have I read in Ireland many years ago. I was invited to the Kirch, which I can never say quite right. Geraldine has tried so hard to get me to say it right. Kirch Festival in Galway. And I read this poem, and the festival goes on for many days. It's poetry, it's prose, it's a fantastic festival. And the reason I'm telling you this is that I read this poem and then I signed books, and one of the women said, I so need that poem and I'm going to show it to my friend tonight. And then she came back and found me and let me know that the poem had kind of worked some magic for her. So I like poems to be of use. The men you don't get to sleep with. And I always like to say it could be the women you don't get to sleep with, the rock stars, the cats. You can fill in any noun there that's appropriate for you. But the men you don't get to sleep with are always the men that you want. The ones who hide something in their long fingered hands and won't let you touch it or tap it, who refuse your good offerings of dark chocolate and flan. The men who come quoting Keats, who winter in Cannes, who summit Rainier without ropes or brains. These fleeting men, fantasies we hold for years past their time, one lone kiss from a cabinet maker, all night laughter with a Bosnian jailer, the amaranth flavor of a passionate painter. No, that's not it. It's not what you think. Not needing that stick, but the act of his tongue licking crumbs, soft breath in your ear as he offers, this is actually fun. Caleb, Dan, the photographer man, the ones with crushed hearts and the ones who had none. Damn these men, remembered unnaturally long. Did their body shelter something lacquered and spun? Something even today that you wish that you'd won. But what if sexual climax was reached with the barista, the sculptor, the sheikh? What then? Then what would we do? The riddle undressed, the pleasure no more than ho-hum. Better to keep imagining this, an elusive rhyme, enhanced and revised on mountain paths, window seats, private jets. The men that you don't get, you do get, set in pen and ink, fantasy, and less grief. They can unceasingly please. So that's one reason to become a writer. You get to finish the story the way you want. The book that I'm sharing with you today, Gallery of Postcards and Maps, New and Selected Poems, the newer poems, the poems that weren't part of the 4 former books, are often about surrealist artists, women surrealists. There's lots of self-portraits and still lifes. And some point, I'm going to do a giant slideshow so that people can see the work. But I think if I'm allowed to screen share, I have got the cover. The next poem is called Caravan of One. And I'd love to, at least for a minute, and I can't do it. Okay, I had a feeling that might be the case. Well, the cover of the book, which again is, you can see it there a little bit. It does show a traveling vehicle, and it's by Remedios. I can show it to you now. Thank you so much. There we go. And I'll just put it on for a minute, but I think it's great to have the visual in your head. There we go. You can see that. Yeah, hopefully. I'm not sure in what size you're seeing it. Great. Thank you. So
It's good.
perfect. This caravan is the title of the piece. It was painted in 1955 by Remedios Varo. And it's very typical of her work in that she did lots of things that had strange kinds of vehicles, often with wheels. So, you know, is this a tricycle? Is this, I'm not sure that there is such a vehicle as this. It's wind, it's going by wind, it's going through the forest at night. The visuals of two individuals, somewhat androgynous, but looks like a woman perhaps and a man. This was the time in Remedios Varo's life, 55, the 50s, when she did her most lasting work. And she was married to someone who said, you're an amazing artist. Stop working, work on your work. You don't have to work in advertising anymore. And so I wanted you to see this because I think it's important to her life. She died at 54, and her death was somewhat mysterious on whether the Mexican government had anything to do with it. That is another story. Caravan of One for Remedios Varo. Better than an orgasm, your own traveling cathedral of piano blues and midnight luminescence. A man lifting you away from the quiet need for a paycheck, the tiresome chat up with ad execs. Better than multiple orgasms, creating your own composition in a land of androgynous beings. The wind-powered bicycle lords obscured to the left, applauding. Your amorous impulses transform into a night of fog-lit paths, driven miles by someone whose face remains carefully masked. Female or male, orgasms arrive much the same. Is art masculine or feminine, highbrow or low? A caravan of one moves into the almost dark, rushing past spectacular lovers that you took lying down. Or were you the liar? Perhaps the autonomous, fearless flyer. Cigarettes, cats, and canvases were all you ever seriously desired. So take a look at her life. You know, I didn't have to do too much. She's got an incredible life and really worth looking at. And I got interested in her work about 10 years ago when I was introduced to her best friend's work, Leonora Carrington. Leonora Carrington's a little better known in this country, perhaps because she was born in Britain, but she actually spent most of her life in Mexico City as well. And there's this wonderful book called Surrealist Friends that I highly recommend if you're interested in them. The third friend was the photographer Katie Horna, who really documented a lot of the friendship. So I'm going to show you one more piece if I'm still able to do that. And this is called Guardian of the Egg. And it has another title as well, but Guardian of the Egg, The Giantess is the other one. And when I started writing about paintings, it was incredibly intimidating. I think it still is. And what could I say that was beyond, is that going to show up? You don't have that yet. There we go. Now it is, yes. And maybe all of those little, there we go. What could I say about a painting that I adored? The painting said it all, didn't it? but words can speak in a way that paintings can't. I'll just say that Leonora Carrington lived for a very long time. So while her friend, Remedios Varo died at 54, Carrington lived into her, I think, early 90s and just died around 2012, 2013, so fairly recently. This piece sold at auction for more money than any other living woman artist ever had. And when her niece called to tell her that, Carrington was not impressed when she heard the word living female artist, because she didn't want to be put into that category. She didn't want to be put into the category of surrealism. Again, many stories about this woman. But I'll just tell you, when I was looking at this piece and going over it and over it, I had a discovery, and I've never told anyone this, so you guys get to hear it for what it's worth. I couldn't figure out what she was holding. Well, Guardian of the Egg made sense that it was an egg. Like, it didn't take me that long to figure that out. But the proportions of this are so bizarre, and it's so different from her other work. So to have this enormous sized woman holding this tiny egg, I mean, now I'm a little embarrassed it took me so long to figure it out, but think about it, enormous woman, tiny egg. When Leonora Carrington painted this, she was pregnant with her first son. And I did that by the dates. I got to play literary private detective, which is one of my favorite things to do. I've never seen that written up. Nobody else seems to have done the dates. And not that we want to reduce everybody's artwork to their life, but I think I'm on to something. So I share that with you. And Leonora Carrington was a writer as well. The Hearing Trumpet was a cult favorite in the 70s and has been reestablished. Again, obviously I could go on, but I'm trying to stop myself from just giving you an art history lesson, which would be so fun, maybe in another life. So we're going to look at the poem, The Teacher and Me just came out, Guardian of the Egg. Because not everyone can wear a velvet dress with a cape of seabirds flying from her chest towards a hieroglyphic sky, you stood out. Your foul language of hyena and humpback whale, your omelets, famous for the buttery flavor of red hair. And in your sketches of a ghost minotaur with griffin, you conjured an unknown bestiary and became yourself. Nowadays, we visit in Seattle, mornings on the way to work, a shimmer of angel cake rises from a surreal sky. You pack my pockets with amulets in the shapes of clouds and limpet shells. I am as mysterious to myself as I am to others, you tell me. In the folded hands of your giantess, you paint a ginormous egg, kitchen essential of beginnings and endings, clairvoyant orb. The light beams as I guide my 90-year-old cousin toward the local YWCA. How she halts, gazing like a scholar at a mother and newborn. I remember how time unhooked then as Molly spoke to the girl baby from one end to the other, and we knew that the tiny one understood how both held edges of the one silk thread, their own alchemical painting. It was the first time I noticed that newborn babies and 90-year-olds have more in common than you would think. All right, I'm going to try to stay with what I planned, although I keep wanting to share something else with you. And I guess I'm going to do it because where else can I change my mind like this? This is another Leonora Carrington piece, and I don't have the painting to show you, so it'll go a little faster. The poem is called Secret Agent. And I guess the only thing that's helpful to know is that Carrington was a rebel from the time she could walk and talk. She didn't want to be at her coming out party. She ran away with Max Ernst when she was 17 years old, left England, went to France. He left, I think, wife number 2. And here's just one last thing about her, because she's so amazing. She would get bored at dinner parties and restaurant dinners, as most of us have had that experience. And she would take off her shoes and paint the bottoms of her feet with mustard to keep herself entertained. So that gives you a sense of who she was. Secret agent. A long-armed monkey lurks by the far edge of the table, a kind of night watchman, half hidden behind lace tablecloths. His tail an upside-down question mark. Naked, of course, and disinclined to join the party. I think of your life this way, Leonora, observer of other realms, holed up like a secret agent with the oddest of binoculars. Your gaze that of professor, or perhaps undertaker. How you hated your coming out party. You said it was like your father selling a product, and not one he believed in. How your teachers complained often. Leonora does not collaborate well. Wild animal, the headmistress hissed as she left her wallpapered rooms for the next. You would recall with distaste weekends of flowing cocktails offered by strangers with odd-shaped heads. The food laid out as some anemic image of the afterlife. You disappeared by then, self-appointed linguist at the local zoo. Each day, meetings with Lasula monkeys, African hyenas, to learn their languages, to paint their gorgeous minds. And I think I will end, if I can find it. This is what happens when you go out of order. One of my favorite living poets is Terence Hayes, and I took the experience from him of writing a poem that just focuses on a face. And his poem from Sonnets from My Past and Future Assassin, a wonderful, wonderful book. He writes about James Baldwin, and I write about someone else. Extreme close-up. All the things I love about his face come from movement. The fishtail line sketched just above the edges of his cheekbones. A tadpole of a mustache, which appears, then disappears, inked along the philtrum, trimmed to obscure the future. And yes, my father's ears do resemble oyster shells, sculptures adorned with an outcropping of hair. Praise be to his widow's peak, unfurrowed and furrowed like a sail for survival, to his small mouth now open, ready for a lobster tail or a knish. And somewhere, perhaps burnishing his jaw or dimpled chin, his father's early death and the knowledge of his own. I scan the code in his crescent-shaped eyes, my eyes, DNA spiraling along a connected shoreline, the taking and giving back of deep waters, his wonderment hooked to sorrow. Thank you so much.
Susan, I am so glad you went out of order. I am so glad you went out of order, because I really believe that the surreal nature of the poetry like emerged by going out of order. Like, it's just, yeah. So I want to encourage you to plan carefully and break it every single time in the future. I've loved every single reading of yours I've ever attended, and I remember the very first one, which was well over 20 years ago. And I know where I was, and I know how I was, like, what I was experiencing when I was hearing your voice and your poems. And the other thing that you've reminded us here so well is that every poem has its own story. And for me, being able to experience the story and the process is as equally intoxicating as hearing the poem. So I so appreciate you so carefully sharing all of that with us today. All of that with us today in such a short span of time to be able to do that. What a gift. Everyone, Susan Rich, the new collection is Gallery of Postcards and Maps, New and Selected Poems. But dare I say, buy that and also buy each of the individual collections as well. Your poetry collection will thank you for having Susan's voice on your bookshelves. Well, our final poet for today, again, I've oh my gosh, I have in my mind the dream of the reading, and then the reading just gets better and better and better than I can ever even imagine it. And that's what I'm experiencing today. I'm so grateful that we get to hear from another poet that I met more than a few years ago. And I just sat next to him at an event in a circle. And then I heard Raul's work. And I was astounded by his voice, his commitment to poetry. And then over the years, I've had a number of interactions. I've been able to hear Raul's work. And of course, Raul joined Cultivating Voices live poetry very early on and came in and did some of our early readings in those times when we were going live to Facebook. So it's always a pleasure when we get to hear even a more extended body of work, and to be able to feature Raul and his latest collection, very important collection. I'm truly honored to be able to feature Raul's work and Raul's voice. It's such a necessary voice, and the message is critically important. And when you learn about what I'm speaking of and what you'll hear from Raul, you'll understand why I'm saying this. Raul Sanchez is the former City of Redmond Poet Laureate from 2019 to 2021. He teaches poetry in Spanish, and he runs the Poetry in the Park at the Meadowbrook Pond in Northeast Seattle. His new collection, When There Were No Borders, was released by Flowersong Press. Again, would you please join me in welcoming this poet of humanity, Raul Sanchez. Thank you, Raul. Gracias.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And so happy to hear Susan and Wyeth. When he mentioned the title of his book, I thought, I have that book. Of course, here in this stack of books, it's somewhere probably in the closet. I enjoy joining with all of you today, and I must say that there's no better chance to convey what we have been experiencing lately based on our work and how we have been impressed. Even the selection that I have here for today is not the same as the one that you have heard before. So I'm mostly from the new book, I'm going to share some of those poems. Excuse me. And a couple of other ones from the a different anthology that came out, and one, the very newest one, which was it's a Santa poem that I created after my term of as a judge for the Artstra Poetry Moves program, Poetry on Buses in Vancouver, for the Clark County metro system. So that'll be the last one. But the first four poems, they all walk together. They all happen outside, outdoors, in the garden, in the forest, in the working fields, and through the vines. Kuora Garden. There is a conversation in the silent garden. Lace leaf, Japanese maple whispers stories in summer moonlight to the azaleas and rhododendrons. Camellia blossoms by the stone vase glow, dazzled waves of pale green and red. Burning bush leaves remind us winter is coming. Two stone bridges united across the pond resembled unity over the reflection. Like humans crossing bridges, walk the hidden paths, sending forget-me-nots to their familial pink fallen petals. In the garden, the sun yearns to cross the moon bridge and merge with the heart bridge covered in snow. Here, all the flowers speak a different language, each petal a different story. Yet, all share the same soil, the same sun, same air, plants and trees living in harmony, like humans should be, across the path, guarded and twisted trunks and the necklace of ponds. The beauty of the garden reflects the beauty of all living things. Ode to an Oak Tree. It has an epigraph. When the oak is felled, the whole forest echoes with its fall. But 100 acorns are sown in silence by an unnoticed breeze. End quote, by Thomas Carlyle. Acres of aging grand trees on the lower ground, boughs bending, rising and falling with the wind, randomly sinking and fainting responsive bird songs, dry ground covered with heart-shaped leaves and twigs. At night, the trees on the higher ground cast their shadow under the clear moonlight. Your branches blow by the east-west wind, secrets told when the birds can't sleep. Full moon filled with countenance, dense, murky clouds, wreaths of fragrant pines, oak and cedar limbs swish with the wind brushed. Your very old mystical greatness stands. Looking at the stars and the gorgeous clouds in summertime, your sun-drenched splendor shelters birds hanging on your moist branches, crows, blue jays, chickadees, and eagle nests. Nakedly standing in spring, your dormant roots thaw below the frozen ground. Do not say that the roots are weak. These roots are strong, the very roots of being. And there were 5 poems that were commissioned by the City of Shoreline, and they all had to be for public art, which this poem is still there at Hamlin Park on a post. You can walk by the upper field and you can see it there, as well as the greensward is there as well. Now changing the landscape outside, we're going to the working fields. And this is in memory of all my relatives that have crossed the border, worked, and gone back to Mexico. But hardly anybody stayed, and that was the way it was done. It's still done to this day, but things have changed immensely. Working the fields. It is a dream. I immerse myself in that dream, which does not feel like a dream, because I am not dreaming. I am reliving what I heard before. Back in the day, the migrant days, a vanished past, but present at best when I smell the fertile soil, aroma of the valley in the early morning, the fragrance of the earth when rain vaporizes, swirls of hope from the hot ground up. I breathe, I'm breathed until my lungs can't hold such bliss, exhaling memories like rows of apples on orange trees, rows of plum trees, rows of lettuce fields, rows of strawberry fields. Everything comes back. The sacks full, crates bursting with fruit, tomatoes, asparagus, bundles, lettuce crates, migrant farm workers filling cotton sacks, heaping, breaking their backs from dawn to sundown, achy muscles, fragile like dry sticks of fine crystal, dirty, thirsty, hungry, men and women with soil on their hands, a day's work for the day's pay with soil still in their fingernails dry. Working the fields is the ultimate reverence men can pay to the land, retrieving the harvest, our land, their land, the land whose soil we walk. The next is Still Outside. And this is a memory of my father. Vines and wind. Wet grass, wind, motors, children running. I'm back to the night my father held my hand across the park where we sat. That cement bench still there. Vines draped over the line, my father's arm draped over my back. The wind, his soft voice, his words, distant chimes. I love you, your noble heart. Indelible ripe as pears, his sweetness waiting to fall. My father gone, late fall. I was 12, too young to learn what he couldn't teach me, to plant vines, to drape like memories, like wind. And now a couple of Ars Poetica. They try them, sometimes they work, sometimes they flaw, but I think these two work and they're in the book as well. And poets don't feel offended, because this is not criticizing, it's just questioning. Or me thinking, have I written anything about this? Am I listening? As we were talking, Sandy was mentioned that we had to listen to be able to understand. Okay. Excuse me, absent poet, but I wonder if you ever wrote anything about the silhouette trees make or the sounds unheard when instruments are played, the cries of hungry people, the snoring of alcoholics sleeping on doorways, torn knee ligaments, steam boiler ignitions, silent conversations in crowded malls, tapping shoes rhythmically at the beat of jazz or blues, leaves on branches high, crows, ears splitting, hubbub, cats, purring dogs, dreaming fish, breathing in the water, tanked, silent. Have you ever heard those sounds, dear absent poet? I've heard them all tonight. And then another little try of Ars Poetica. Poets' Temple. I would like to see a temple for poets, where every Sunday the sermon begins with Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, followed by Yeats, a dialogue of self and soul, and William Blake, the angel. Ezra Pound will make the sharp distinction between literary and esoteric traditions. May Sarton will jump in to tell us how it is. William Carlos Williams will debate her points. Neruda will bring understanding to the words we heard. Meanwhile, Federico Garcia Lorca will stand in the pulpit to tell us all about La Aurora. Cuando llega y nadie la recibe en su boca, porque allí no hay mañana ni esperanza posible. La luz es sepultada por cadenas y ruidos. Solemn music invades the atrium when the modern poets, the beats walk in like the saints did at one time. In the line we see Ginsberg, Kerouac, Marty Matz, Bukowski, books under the shoulders, ready to let the words fly in the air. The music and the voices filled the space, and all of us bowed down to our muses floating in thin air, glorifying the words, sound, metaphor, and rhyme, where poetry lives and shines. So my attempt to do a little ars poetica there. Next is a new one. It is published in this project for land preservation, and I chose the part of a spot in the Olympic Peninsula, and that happened to be the Curly Creek Preserve, the Curly Creek Tyner Preserve. And 2 poems from that spot that I had to be there almost a whole day to observe are published in here. So this one is Curly Creek Tyner Preserve. Filter sunlight on a damp drizzly day, raindrops slide slowly from the petiole to the tip. Cordate, serrate, crenate, lobed, unparted leaves, old-growth trees flank the path. Silent murmur emanating from ancient glacial deposits give life to the creek, streaming down to Long Lake. Luscious, luscious nursing logs guard the green path, erect like strings of a Welsh triple harp. The open meadow soaked in rain, blackberry bushes drip joyfully. Birch branches filled with hanging moss, resembling ladies' veils, a sign of reverence. Above the canopy, an eagle soars like a baton, creating rhythmic circles against the laden sky. Hushed symphony best listened to with eyes closed. Today, the creek sings the songs of the Suquamish tribe, protectors of the land. Each step on the soggy ground brings us closer to the creek, guided by the sound of the water. A moment of reflection and respect for the land and the abundant life the estuaries provide. Deer walk upstream, single file, waving their white tails. Water is a symbol of life. Curly Creek, where salmon species spawn and wildlife abounds, early fall, best time to witness adult salmon swimming upstream. Back to the spawning grounds, coho, chum, steelhead, chinook, and cutthroat trout plentiful feast for the sea lions, harbor seals, porpoises, and orca whales in Yukon Harbor. Curly Creek Tiny Preserve, where life spawns, where life thrives, where life prevails. And it is a beautiful place. Anybody can get involved with this program. You can pick a spot, and then I'll put that in the later. I'll send it to Sandy. And you can pick a spot, and then you go out there, you experience the place, and you write about it, you feel it, you take it within, and you breathe in, and you exhale, and then you write about it. And it's just a wonderful experience that daily I've been engaged with. Next, and just a couple more. This is a newsletter that William Griffith sends. He prints this, and he sold 1911 WordPress by hand press. The title of the newsletter is Good Word Walking. So this one came out in November 24th when I was still vacationing in Southeast Asia. But at the bottom, there's a poem of mine. It's titled Friday Night. Last day of work week, a day that acquires a slacking tone, informal day for some to hang around and casually work. When I was younger, Friday nights used to be dance nights until 2, salsa, cumbia, merengue. I used to waste my evening watching television, movies to no end. Television had everything I didn't need to know. Friday night, party night, no more. I just want to be home and rest my weary head, have dinner and a glass of Merlot, and let thoughts dance in my brain, reading poetry, writing poems, keeping me from going insane. So I'd rather do that than being outside. All right. This is a meditation. And it's also in another anthology that came out last year by the Yellow Medicine Review. I got 4 poems in here. Sorry. There it is. And I'll share one of them. Washing the dishes. Breakfast done. Scrubbing dirt and grime from glasses smudged. My mind wanders off, away from the current, the flow, the worries, the plans, the doubts. Soaped sponge, scrubbing brush, water pouring clear, slippery plates and cups, midnight teacup empty. Water, cleansing water, purifying element, 1 part oxygen, 2 parts hydrogen. Some waters become holy, depending on their origin. For me, washing dishes is an act of renewal, repentance, reverence, and surrender. Our world needs it as much as our bodies and souls. I scrub and rinse the daily grime away. And I do that. I've taken washing the dishes as my regular everyday activity because it puts me in that mood of being thankful. And lastly, I was commissioned to be the judge for the season 12 of Poetry on Buses for the Clark County bus system. And at the end of all that, I thought that I was so pleased and grateful that for the chance to do that, that I decided to write a cento poem using the lines of the people who were selected for to have boards like this on the buses. So this is an actual board that you'll see on the buses out there. So this is the cento that I gave as a gift for all of them. The title is Season 12 because of the season of the poetry. What color would I be under your absent gaze, under cloud-swooped sky? Looking up, I see I'm in this cathedral of trees. Their roots are deep and stubborn, twisting on their ground, foot by unlit foot, grasping for a moment, then letting go. The tide came up, and now my footprints are no more. Life doesn't have to be so hard. Our 10-minute friendship comfortably unfolds. Call me sometime. A breath of sublime rewards, motion with grace. And again, that was my gift to all of the participants of the program. And if you go to Vancouver, you'll see some of these on some of the transit system down there. And I thank you, Sandy, and everyone for listening to me, waiting for me. Sometimes I have troubles with the digital stuff, but somehow here we are and we made it work. Thank you so much from my heart to you.
Muchas gracias, Raul. I love the poems, and I always love it when you're on the program. And the new collection is When There Were No Borders, as well as we were treated to also such vibrant newer work as well, which I always come to expect when I get to engage with you and your poetry. And it's always such an amazing pleasure. I wanted to also say that I love the idea of the cento, of taking the lines of those poets that you were contemplating and working with for that project. What an incredible way to like honor that work. And I think that would be so awesome for all of us who are judges for different kinds of contests to be able to create to create a a tribute to the submissions that way. That's just absolutely brilliant. Well, everyone, today our first new book showcase of the new year. As I said, like I knew what an incredible puzzle it was going to be, and that we would hear such amazing newer work, and the constellation of it was going to be astounding, and I feel it exceeded my wildest expectations. I want to give the most heartfelt thanks to Suzanne Edison, Adam Wyeth, Susan Rich, and Raul Sanchez. And before I say a few closing remarks, would you please, how about we unmute and show our deep appreciation for our esteemed poets today?
Bravo.
Bravo.
Susan. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Fantastic.
Beautiful audience.
Thank you.
Oh,
Gracias a todos. Ah.
Milho
All
Buicos.
right.
well, everyone, I loved what Raul talked about, the Temple of Poets. And before I say a few things about what's upcoming next, I wanted to just take a moment to honor and reflect and remember one of our members who passed away this week, poet Kevin Higgins from Galway. And we were able to hear Kevin read from his latest collection in our new book showcase in the fall. His book is Ecstatic, from Salmon Poetry. And I know there's been many tributes online, but again, to have a voice of like Kevin's, and to be able to hear that on our program. And I also had met Kevin, and I know so many of you know Kevin and Susan, and those of you who spent time in Galway in the reading series. It is a tremendous loss, not just to the local community, the poetry community in Galway, or to the community in Ireland, but Kevin's reach was astounding across the world. And he is truly, truly a citizen of poetry, and a voice to reckon with, because he spoke that truth to power in his poetry as a satirist, as well as a citizen. And I just I'm deeply saddened by his loss, and I thought so much about his reading of when he read with us this fall. So I want to encourage you all to go to our archives. And if you didn't attend the reading in person, we have an opportunity in perpetuity, because of the recordings that we have, to hear Kevin's voice through time, through our reading series. And I'm really grateful that we have his poetry as a legacy to the memory of this astounding human being, Kevin Higgins. Well, we will join in the Temple of Poetry, as Raul said. The Temple of Poets will return next week. And next week, it is our wild card open mic. You never know what comes out of the deck when we join to read in our wild card open mic. The first 12 poets that sign up 15 minutes before the reading will be our featured poets And as always, we aspire to have a little bit of a bonus round of poetry if you arrive and are beyond the 12 poets. So do join us next Sunday for our wild card open mic for January. And of course, look forward to all the new book showcases and our featured themed readings, as well as our wild card open mics for this new season of 2023.
Can I put out a teaser, Sandy, for the themed reading in February?
Oh, please do, because we want people to get writing for that, don't we?
So we're going to do something a little bit different with our Poets Focus in February in honor of Black History Month. Our word is voice, but we're really focusing on the meaning of that word in the context of James Weldon Johnson's Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I'm going to advertise it a little earlier than usual so that it can help prime the pump. We're going to have a few featured poets who will set the stage and share their voice and lift up the meanings and permutations of that word in the context of that amazing poem and hymn. And then we'll open it up for others to share a single poem inspired by that as well, or something you've already written that you feel connects deeply. So I just wanted to share that out because it's a little different than our
Yes,
usual
thank you. You're
themed
right.
open mics.
Very good. And that's February, friends, just around the corner. Well, as usual, I actually once a month I have 2 gigs that I'm hosting. This is my double featured Sunday. So I'll be signing off with you all today, and hope some of you can hop over to another channel in a few hours to hear the West East Coast Poets of the Pandemic, Bi-Coastal Poets of the Pandemic, with some great featured readers there for today. That'll be at 4 o'clock Pacific, that's 7 Eastern, and I'm sure our friends around the world. It's probably a little late for all of you. But if you're around in a couple hours, join me for another quartet of poets. And until then, and until next Sunday, I hope you all will be very well. As I say every week, take good care of yourselves, take extremely good care of your beloveds. And look what happens when we write our miraculous poems. We had such an incredible example of that today with our 4 poets. Keep writing those exquisite poems. Sandy Yannone for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, with thanks to Don Krieger, Kim Ports Parsons. Can't do it without you, and can't do it without our amazing audience. Thanks for being here today, and we'll see you very soon. Be well. Everybody.